Hello, this is Chris from Nemo, and if you like what you see here, please click the subscribe button so you'll be informed of future videos as they arrive. Now, last week, we did a review of first-run copper cables, and believe me, there's no one more skeptical of cable claims than I am. Having over $20,000 worth of cables in my system, I know that when someone claims to be the best, well, they're going to be going up against some of the best cables in the world in my system. And I'll tell you this right now, first run copper cables blew my speaker cables out of the water. They are that good. And so I promised you an interview with Dr. Tist. Now, before we continue, couple things. All the links that you need for first run copper or for the previous review of first run copper cables are in the description below. And unfortunately, Dr. Tist could not be here for a one-on-one video. He wanted me to just simply read you the text from our conversation, but I figured that might be a kind of a boring video, so I decided that I will read the text verbatim, but I will play myself when I wear red, and I will put on a burnt orange sports jacket when I play Dr. Tist. I figured that might make the interview a little bit more interesting than just reading off of a piece of paper for about a minute and a half or 2 minutes. So without further ado, here's the interview with Dr. Tist. Oh, and one last thing. Everything was approved by First Run Copper. They listened to this video before I uploaded it, and they admit that everything stated here is verbatim from our conversation. Okay, so here's the interview. Dr. Tist, thank you for joining me today, and I'd like to let everyone know that you have a PhD in quantum mechanics from MIT and an electrical engineering degree from Stanford. So some of the information here might get a little dry, but so be it. We're trying to prove unequivocally using science that your cables sound better than any other cable available. It's no problem, Chris. And please call me Connor. So how can I help you today? Connor, I've spoken to a few electrical engineers, and I've read a lot of information about cables from Audio Science Review and Audioholics, in which they claim that cables don't make any difference at all and that they won't measure any differently at all. So could you speak a little bit technically on how your cables sound differently? Well, Chris, let me tell you and all the skeptics out there that first run copper cables change everything. We don't just make better cables. We make the best cables that you could possibly purchase. They are the best because they start with the best copper. We hand inspect every piece of copper ore before it goes through the extrusion process. We throw away 95% of what we look at. And then we only accept the copper that comes out through the first extrusion process. This is something that no other cable company bothers with because the expense is outrageous. That being said, the final quality of the music you receive is the best you'll ever get from any cable, not just today, but 1,000 years into the future. There is no technical way of making a better cable. So your cables measure differently than any other cable? I wish it was so simple, but measurements are based on math and science, and there's a lot of complicated charts and other things that go on. The big piece that you and your listeners can take away from everything is that measurements only measure the zeros and ones. They are digital devices measuring information in a digital way. They cannot measure the analog quality of cables, and they miss a huge part of what our cables capture in the musical process. This is all so confusing. Let me simplify this. Our cables sound better because they're made with better materials. Now, the skeptics out there will say a million different things about, oh, measurements. But the fact is that everyone knows that better quality materials make better products. And we are using the best copper in the world. Let me give you a quick analogy. You go to the store, the grocery store, and pick up some San Marzano tomatoes that have been sitting there for who knows how long. Who knows if they were shipped when they were green and only turned red on the truck. And then you go to the farmer's market. You pick up those same San Marzano tomatoes, and you make 2 tomato sauces with each batch. Which one's going to taste better? The fresh tomatoes, of course. But they wouldn't measure differently. If you took both to a lab, the lab would tell you they're both 100% pure San Marzano tomatoes. It doesn't know the difference between a good tomato and a bad tomato. So they can't measure the musical quality of the copper. They can only measure that it's copper. Exactly. And now that we've got better copper, we have a better cable. Now, we could have stopped right there, but we knew there was another issue. The fact is that copper comes through an extrusion process, and we only use copper that comes through the first extrusion process. You lost me. Think of it like olive oil. When you buy olive oil, you can buy extra virgin olive oil, which everyone knows is better, and it came through the first pressing. Or you can buy standard olive oil, which came through the second, third, fourth. I don't know how many times they can press olive oil, but they certainly seem to be able to press it a lot. Everyone knows that extra virgin olive oil is the best olive oil, but it's still 100% pure olive oil. No different than olive oil that came through the third pressing. Once again, measurements can't tell the difference between extra virgin olive oil and third or fourth pressing olive oil. They both come back with the same exact measurement that this is 100% pure olive oil. So our copper is going to come back as 100% pure copper. Our copper is going to come back with the same measurements as any other copper, but it's better copper, and it came through the first extrusion process. So let's take this whole story back to these electrical engineers at these different websites. If I take 100% pure olive oil and send it to the lab, if I take second pressing olive oil and send it to the lab, do you agree with me that it's going to come back from the lab as 100% pure olive oil? Yes. So that is why our copper cables won't measure differently than other copper cables, because they're measuring if they're 100% or 99.997% pure copper. Now that makes sense. Well, you're a bit quicker than most. And let me complete this interview, because I do have to run. We are very busy here, by telling you that measurements mean nothing when it comes to the quality of copper, because they are only going to tell you that it's copper. They're only going to tell you that it conducts electricity. Well, guess what? All copper conducts electricity. All copper, if it's well made, will be 99.9997% pure. But our copper is better copper. Our copper comes through the first extrusion process only. And just like every single chef in the world will tell you that extra virgin olive oil is better, I am telling you that first run copper is better. While all the skeptics are looking at measurements, they've forgotten the music. The purpose of the cable is to carry the music, and they're not measuring music. They're measuring ones and zeros. And that's why our cables will sound so different, but to the measurement guys, they won't look different. And Chris, I want to thank you for having me here today. It's been a pleasure. So that's the technical gobbledygook right from the mouth of Dr. Tist from First Run Copper. So let me get down to something a little bit simpler, because I know that was a lot of engineering talk and it probably bored most of you right out of your minds. The simple end game part of this cable is that they quadruple the sound definition of generic cables and significantly improve upon any other cable I've ever heard at any price. And if you are skeptical of paying the kind of money that First Run is asking, which actually is about half the price of top-end cables out there, let me add that they have a 10-day money-back guarantee. No questions asked. Lastly, if you do go out and buy these amazing cables, not only will you never need cables again, but everything you hear will be the first time. You will hear music as if you'd never heard it before. They are that good. There is no listening and trying to figure out, oh, it's slightly better in the highs, or it's a better treble, or it's a little bit more liquid. No, these cables are stunning. There might not be a measurement that can tell you they're different, but when you listen to them, you will be literally blown away. Night and day difference. All you have to do is get them, let them sit out for about 10 hours so that they kind of get used to the room, then burn them in for approximately 250 hours. Once that's done, you've met the requirements of getting this cable set up, and then all you have to do is listen and enjoy. Don't like them? Send them back. What could be better than that? Thanks for listening, and make sure you subscribe so that you're aware of the next video we put out. Thank you.